righty.
I'd like to thank everyone for the program today. To tell you a little bit about our speaker, Fran Sandin is going to be sharing about her writing journey and some excerpts from her latest book, which are also going to be for sale. So if anybody interested after the program, just see Kristen and she'll take care of that for you. Fran is a graduate of Texas Women's University. She's also an organist, a retired nurse, and Dr. James Sandin's wife, who's a retired urologist from the hospital. A few of her books include See You Later, Jeffrey, Touching the Clouds, True Stories to Strengthen Your Faith, and Hope on the Way, which is her newest one. And she's also written a lot of articles for magazines, and also helped contribute to a whole bunch of other books as well. Would like to thank today's sponsors, Chip Cole, for helping to support the program today. And so without further ado, I'll turn it over to Fran.
Good morning, and thank you for coming. Can you hear me? My voice is kind of soft.
I can hear you. Yeah, we're good.
Okay, good. Well, I'm so happy to be here today. I want to start with a poem that I really appreciate. My life is but a weaving between my Lord and me. I cannot choose the colors, he worketh steadily. Ofttimes he weaveth sorrow, and I in foolish pride forget he sees the upper, and I the underside. Not till the loom is silent and the shuttle cease to fly, shall he unroll the canvas and explain the reason why. The dark threads are as needful in the weaver's skillful hand as the threads of gold and silver in the pattern he has planned. This is an opportunity today for me to share with you how God has worked in my life, and I want to thank him and give him the glory, because without him I can do nothing. I saw this little mug and I thought, this is going to be the theme of my talk today. Impossible is God's starting point.
Yeah.
Have you ever argued with God?
Tried.
Everyone has a story, but mine began when God prompted me to write a book. And I had no intentions of becoming an author. I never said, oh, I'd love to write a book. That never entered my mind. And so I argued with him and I said, but I'm not an author. I don't know, I'm not a writer, and I don't know how to write a book. And his quiet response was, I am a writer, and I know how to write a book. After our 17-month-old Jeffrey passed away in 1974, I was totally devastated. I had many questions, like, is God punishing me? Does he really answer prayer? How can I overcome fear? Will I ever get over this? And how could God possibly use this for good in my life? I went to the Christian bookstore and looked for a book, but I couldn't find one that addressed the questions that were burning my heart. So for 2 years, I prayed and I asked God to help me answer those questions. And I accumulated many Bible verses and ideas from pastors and radio programs that I heard, different things, because I put out my spiritual antenna and tried to find the answers to these questions. After those 2 years, I felt that God had given me a message that might encourage other parents who were grieving. But I did not have the skill to write it. But at the Lord's constant urging and prompting, I finally gave up and said, okay, Lord, if this is your will for me, then I will try to do it. So I called my friend who was an English teacher, and I told her the problem that I had a message, I didn't know how to share it. And she said, well, bring your notes over and we'll work on it. So I did. I had notes in a little zipper pouch, and I took it over and we unzipped it, poured it out on her kitchen table, and together we made an outline. And that is how I began working on this project. So one day a week, I would put my notes and my typewriter in the car, and when I dropped the children off at school, then I would drive down to our little cabin at Lake Tawakoni. And there I would spend the day writing and crying. It took 4 years to come up with the first draft of a manuscript. And then I didn't know what to do. So I went to the public library and checked out books on how to prepare a manuscript. Well, that took a while too. Jill Baker typed up my final draft, and I started sending it off to different publishing houses. Well, I didn't know at that time that a writer is supposed to check out the publishing house to see if they would like to look at your material. So I was sending it out to all the wrong places. I sent it out 26 times, and 26 times it came back. Well, I had some discouraging times. One friend let a person at the university read the manuscript. And after that, he said, well, her husband is a doctor, so she should hire somebody to tell her story. I said, well, that's not very encouraging. That's not what God told me to do. So I just kept trucking. Well, a new friend came to town and she said, you need to send your manuscript to, or take it to a Christian Writers Conference. Well, I never heard of that, and I didn't even know that something like that was available. So I did go to the Christian Writers Conference. I did take my manuscript, and at the conference, I learned how to write magazine articles. I also met an editor from Tyndale House, which was one of the top 4 Christian publishing houses. And she looked at the manuscript and she said, I like this, but I'm going to make some suggestions. So I took the suggestions that she made and went back home and rewrote the manuscript again. Writing is often rewriting when you learn, when you get started on it. So in that next year, I got 3 magazine articles published, and I went back the next year to the Christian Writers Conference. Virginia Mirror was there, and she said, oh, I love what you've done. I'm going to take it back to my committee and see if we can get this published. Well, sure enough, 11 years after I first started working on it, and on the 27th submission, my book, See You Later, was published in a pretty little hardback gift book. And the theme is answering the questions that I had after Jeffrey died. It is now available in a paperback, and it's online, it's on Amazon. Okay, now I have a published book. Well, it's exciting, it's thrilling, it's wonderful, authors are expected to sell their books also. And so I was scared. I didn't know that I was going to have to be the marketing agent as well. But courage is fear that has said its prayers.
Good one.
So I started praying, and then what followed was just beyond my imagination. Enough time had passed that I could talk about Jeffrey without crying, and that was really important. I had many radio and interviews in the state of Texas, but also in other states. And then I had television interviews in Chicago, North Carolina, and a Christian station in Toronto, Canada. Some grief support groups in the area invited me to speak. But in the publishing industry, they look at how many books you're selling. If you don't sell enough books, then they allow it to go out of print. Well, Jim and I were really feeling that God wasn't finished with this little book yet. So, since I had the copyright, we bought the plates from Tyndale, and we had 2,000 copies printed using the original format. In the meantime, I've been having some articles published in Moody magazine. And one day I received an email request from a pastor in Germany named Jacob Dyke. And he wanted permission to reprint one of my articles out of Moody magazine. And I thought, well, he's a pastor, maybe he could use a copy of See You Later, Jeffrey. So I sent him the copy along with the permission, and I never expected to hear from him again. A few months later, he sent me an email, and he said, have you ever considered having your book translated into Russian? Well, I almost fell off my chair. No, never thought of it. And he said that a lot of Russian families had come into Germany, and he had a memorial service for a boy who passed away, and the family rushed up to him later and said, I need this book. Where can we get this book? So, of course, I agreed to work with Jacob, and we actually went back and forth on the email for several months, and he ended up translating See You Later, Jeffrey, so that the Russian people could read it.
Amen.
And this is See You Later, Jeffrey in Russian. Over time, I received some very touching letters that were written in Russian. I could not read a word of it. Well, I found out that one of the servers at Tony's Italian restaurant, Galina, was from Belarus, and she knew how to speak and write Russian. So I asked her if she would help me, and she said yes. So she translated the letters that I received. And it was so interesting. Most of them were from women, but one of the most touching ones to me was from a young man. And he said that he was a husband and a father, and that he was touched by the book because he never even considered that he might lose one of his family members. And he said that it helped him to be a better husband and father. Well, God has a way of enlarging our tents, and that happened to me. In 1990, I joined with 4 other ladies in Greenville as we began to meet and encourage each other in our writing. And one day, Becky said, well, we should write one of those, soup for the chicken soul books. Well, we laughed because she meant to say, chicken soup for the soul. But we started laughing and we decided, well, we could use that as a theme for a unique approach. So we ended up calling ourselves the Hens with Pens. And Honor Books in Tulsa, Oklahoma published our 2 books, Courage for the Chicken-Hearted and Extra Courage for the Chicken-Hearted. Humorous and inspiring stories for confident living. Courage became a bestseller in the Christian market with over 100,000 books sold, and Guidepost published both books in hardback as a set, and they sold 60,000 copies.
Wow.
Well, in 1998, we attended the Christian Booksellers Convention in Florida, where we were honored by our publisher with a special dinner. And in preparation to go, I'm going to show you what we wore. These are 5 ladies. This was one of our outfits.
I like that medal.
That's cute.
And then we had these little denim vests. We had 1 on the front and 5 on the back. So we had so much fun and attracted a lot of attention with our chicken stuff. So, you know, God can use our blunders and turn them into blessings. Well, I had to go home before the other ladies left the convention. And when I arrived at the Orlando airport, I don't know if you've been there, but they have 2 large lobbies, Lobby A and Lobby B, depending on which airline you're with. And so I checked into the airport at Lobby A. I went through security, but my mind was really set on going to the Disney store at the gate area to get a gift for our new granddaughter, Emily. So I rushed out of the security area, went up, got on the people mover to go out from Lobby A to the gate. I went in the Disney store, I walked around, I found the perfect thing for Emily. I reached down to pay for it, and I didn't have my purse. I had my attaché case, but I said, oh no, I must have left it at security. So I was all flustered, and I went and got on the people mover, but it went to Lobby B and not Lobby A. So I had to ride it back to the gate, get on the people mover for Lobby A, and then go back. Well, by the time I got there, I was running back to security. I saw a uniformed attendant there, and I said, I think I left my purse. Do you know if it's here? And she very nonchalantly opened a drawer, reached in, got my purse. She opened it up, looked at the driver's license, and she said, here, this looks like you. She said, here's your purse. So then I was so relieved, but I jumped on the Lobby A people mover out to the gate. I got out there. By this time, people were all lined up and already getting on the plane. I was so afraid I was going to miss my flight. By the time I got to my middle seat on the plane, and I just relaxed, there was a gray-haired, kind-faced gentleman on the side by the aisle, and he was very calm. And he said, well, did you go to the convention? And I said, oh, yes, I did. And he said, well, I did too. Well, we had a nice conversation. He asked me what books I had, and I had a copy of the 2 chicken books. And I said, well, this is what I was there for. And I told him a little bit about our story. And he said, oh, I think my wife would love those books. I said, well, you just take those home to your wife. Well, I found out, he later told me that his name was Jim Cornelison, and he was the Word of Life Press representative to select books for publishing in Korea. Well, I just was excited to get home, and I never thought any more about Mr. Cornelison. A few months later, Honor Books sent us a notice that our chicken books had been printed in Korean. So we're glad that our tent has been enlarged. Then Jim and I had mission opportunities. In 2010, Jim and I were invited by Charles Mayo to go as mission partners with the Singing Men of Texas. And so we did. We were excited. Michael Gott from Keller, Texas was the evangelist. So as the men gave their concert, then after the concert, Michael Gott would give a gospel message. The people were amazingly responsive to all that. Well, when we found out we were going, I told Michael and Jan about the book I had that was already in Russian. And they said they would love to have those books. So we had 2,000 copies printed up in Russian. And then at the end of each of the concerts, on the 10 nights we were there, we would give out 200 books. And it was really quite an experience for us. Then as a bonus, we came home by Leipzig, Germany, where we met Jacob Dyke and his wife, Helene. And we had been communicating about this visit. Helene wanted to make sure that I had a dress because they were inviting us to go to church. And they wanted us to give our testimony. And so we did. We went to church with them, and we each gave our testimony. And as we were giving our testimony, the pastor, Jacob, was translating for us. So it was quite an experience. After our church service, we had lunch with them and some other couples in a very small apartment. And thankfully, there were 2 college students there who could speak English. So they helped us communicating, and it was just a wonderful experience. As a bonus, because I am an organist, we visited the Thomas Kirky Church, where Johann Sebastian Bach was the organist and wrote a lot of his music in the 1700s. And I have a little magnet that I got there just to remind me about that day. It was so special, so special. Well, in 2012, we again went with Michael Gott and the Singing Men of Texas to the Ukraine. Every venue was packed. People were waiting outside to get in, but there was no more room. And a lot of them had to be turned away. During these concerts, the presence of the Holy Spirit was so real and so strong that it was really just electrifying. The men had learned how to sing in Russian, "How great is our God." The people responded amazingly. Some of them stood and raised their hands. Some of them were crying. Some of them just stood up. It was just amazing. And we just really felt the presence of God there. Many had been told that there is no God, but they knew in their hearts that night that there is God and that He loves them. I have 3 stories in my book, Hope on the Way, related to these missions and the people that I met there. Okay, I also have a book that's called Touching the Clouds. One day I thought, well, I have a story, but a lot of other people have stories too. So I interviewed 15 women, most of them from Greenville. Probably you would know some of the ladies that I interviewed. I interviewed them, got their story. I identified an element of grace and character and just the way they responded to their hardship, an element of faith. After their story, I wrote it in first person. I made sure with them that each one of them read it and confirmed that it was right. Then at the end of each chapter, I had a faith lifter to help the reader incorporate the element of faith that they demonstrated in their lives and in our lives. So, Touching the Clouds is still available. Okay, this was the NAV Press version of it. When it went out of print, EA Books in Florida has it published. But the inside is the same on both of these books. This one's available online on Amazon. And I found out later, I received this in the mail. This is in Korean. Touching Clouds. I didn't get to show you the chicken books, but these are the 2 chicken books. Now these are out of print. They may have some, on Amazon they have used books. Sometimes you can get them that way. That's the only way I know. Okay, then I had an idea for another book, and I went to the Christian Booksellers Convention. I met with an editor, and he was very, I guess I used the word arrogant, but when I was talking with him, the first question he asked me was, how many books have you sold of Touching the Clouds? And when I told him, he said, you'll never get another book published. So I thought, well, that's not very encouraging. He was from a big publishing house. So I came home and I remembered an old East Texas saying, if you can't run with the big dogs, stay on the porch. So in 2018, I went to a writer's workshop in Dallas. There is a 501c3 organization called Roaring Lambs. And at this, I felt like this was a good place for me to try to get my book. The first thing I did with Roaring Lambs was to write my testimony, which they did publish it. It's called Stories of Roaring Faith, and it's volume 4, and it's also on Amazon. And mine was called Walking Through the Fire. So the ministry in Dallas is more of an evangelistic ministry where they have Bible studies and in the marketplace. They have them at hotels and places like that. And they have men's meetings, and they also have women's luncheons. But the idea is to try to get the gospel out to people who may not have a chance or may not be interested in going to church. So I wrote, in 2020, I wrote Hope on the Way, Devotions to Go. Hope is, according to Alistair Begg, hope is the certainty of a reality not yet experienced. Most of the stories, or 52 stories in my book, Hope on the Way, are related to our travels. People that we met on the way, opportunities to share Christ. In between these sections are scriptures related to hope and what it means to me. Most people know that our son, Steve, he was a physical therapist. He passed away in 2012. He had two devastating diseases, but before he left the earth, he wrote 2 books, and he also wrote a tract. 2 months before he died, he wrote, So What Happens Next? And so I knew that I couldn't write a book about Steve because I could not go back through the suffering that he went through before he died. So I have dedicated my book, Hope on the Way, to Steve's memory, and I've included the tract at the end of the book. I have copies here today, and you're welcome to take a copy of the tract. And my book, Hope on the Way, is for sale, and if you want to buy one, the money goes to the Cotton Museum. So I want to say, to God be the glory, and special thanks to my husband, Jim, who has been my encourager, my provider, and patron of the arts. So without him, I would not be standing here today. As Paul Harvey would say, now you know the rest of the story. So, and if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer. And if I can, I'll have Jim come up here because he can answer. Yeah.
I caught the fact that you had a book that had the word roaring in it, and the group you joined had the word roaring. Did you have the book named before you joined the group in Dallas?
No, it was already their name, and they have several books, not just the one I contributed to, but each year they have a conference where they teach people how to write their story. I didn't go to their conference because I already knew how to write my story. So I submitted it and they accepted it. So.
Thank you.
Sure.
That's it.
Can you say a little bit more about roaring? Now, you that is all you're writing, or do you have several stories in it?
Actually, they have a publishing arm, and I'm not the only one that's had a book published with Roaring Lamps.
Okay.
But they, as a group, have these conferences to teach people how to write their story. But publishing is just one part of their ministry.
Oh, okay.
They
Didn't
have,
realize that.
they have other ministries, women's luncheons at some of the country clubs in the Dallas area. They have men's Bible studies in some of the workplace areas. So they're very much evangelistic outreach. They also have interviews, podcasts. I was interviewed once with them, and I think it may be on my website, I'm not sure. My website is www.fransandin.com, and I have put several of my articles on there, and they're free. You can download them. So, anyway.
Listening to your story, the more I think about it, it's like so many times in our life we want God to work right then and there, but it's always on His time. Mm-hmm. We read about Lazarus, and Lazarus was dead already, and everybody thought, well, you're too late. Mm-hmm. No, he arrived precisely the right time for everyone to be able to see a miracle. Mm-hmm. In your walk, I know there must have been so frustrating so many times when you either were rejected or thinking this was never going to happen. What kept you motivated and going?
Really, it was just the burning in my heart that God would not let me let it go. It was like He just kept on with me. One thing I forgot to say was the morning that I left for this second Christian Writers Conference that I attended, this was my devotional for that morning. Isaiah 46:11. I have spoken it, said the Lord. I will also bring it to pass. I have purposed it. I will also do it. So with God, I mean, if He calls you to do something and gives you the ability to do it, then He will bring it to pass. Thank you for reminding me, I forgot.
And that was Isaiah what?
Isaiah 46, verse 11. So, okay. Well, it's been wonderful to be with you. I've enjoyed it so much. I gave you each a little gift you can take. And if you know someone that you want to give one to, I have some extras, so help yourself. And hope you have a wonderful day. If you want to see what Russian writing looks like, I've got a copy of your
That's neat. I enjoyed that. That was